On today's episode of the Unveiled podcast, Brace Harris and I discuss the nervous system and regulation. What the heck does that even mean? Is it necessary? Should we always be super regulated? When should we be regulated? What does this whole concept of the nervous system relate to? And how can we utilize it in our own lives to improve what we do, how we are, how we show up, and how we feel? And is it always common sense to be absolutely regulated in every situation, or is there variety? This is a deep dive into everything that Unveil is bringing to you in the coming months and year. And it's exciting, and we really would love you to enjoy this episode and take loads away from how we share about the nervous system and whether regulation is truly the goal.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brace Harris.
And my name is Victoria Fenton.
And we are
Unveil.
Hello, everyone. We are also in different time zones.
We're in different, yeah. So sorry if you're dizzy, listeners. But I am currently in Austin, Texas, where I arrived very early this morning. So it was a very late arrival. And I kind of, I never do things smoothly, do I, Brace? There was a good few chaotic bumps along the way. But arrived here and have my own beautiful little home in kind of the suburbs of Austin. So we are two-state Unveil for a little bit.
Yes. But it's much better than halfway across the world.
We got to structure our week in diary time and build in our meetings, and it genuinely feels so much better to be 2 hours different. So, but also it's little things like I spoke to my mum just before we jumped on today, and it was 3:00 here and 9:00 there, and she's still up. Whereas that is different when I'm in LA because she's long since gone to bed. So it's just a very interesting, but she we are so confused. She's like, what time's your big 3-hour training thing tomorrow? And I'm like,
what's today?
I know what time it was in California. So yeah, we will adapt. But yes, for anyone who listened to our last podcast, I don't do things slowly, so I'm already here and we are already working away. And the dates have now been announced for all the things. So workshop on July the 30th and 31st. So yeah, but we are here and we are still going strong. And Brace is always very supportive of Victoria's harebrains. I think I need to do this. And he's like, okay.
Great.
Yeah.
I like it. How can I support you?
How can I support you? Yeah. And basically in the back of his mind, he's going, oh, good God, when does it end?
It ends when it's supposed to. Ends when it's supposed to. Yeah. I think that all of this is very important to nail down what we really want, what we really need. It's I feel like a lot of the times we're taught that we kind of have to deny those impulses. And those impulses are there for a reason. One way or the other, they're going to get you to where you need to be. So I'm all for it. There we go.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because I think that particularly when you're in our industry, Austin is always a question mark for people, because it seems to be the kind of gathering hub where everybody tends to migrate. And there are various reasons for that. And some of them are, I was going to say more legitimate than others. Anybody's reasons are legitimate and whatever, but some of them are financial. Yeah. Let's be clear. There are tax breaks in Texas, which are distinct.
Yes.
Particularly when you're moving out from California, which is not exactly a tax-friendly state. But there are also community here. And that's the reason that I'm here. There is that real sense of, okay, so my instinct when I left Africa was to find my tribe, and Brace is a huge part of my tribe, but that doesn't mean that I have to live around the corner from him, because we get to chat every day. I'm super lucky. I get to bother this guy with random text messages at any hour of the day or night, as he found out last night. Just like, I'm here. It's so exciting. But there is a need to explore what else is there for me, particularly as my life is so not yet established. I've done so much, and what you witness within Unveil is what I've done. That's what you witness here. But my personal life, my kind of, friendship circles, relationships, having a home that I can call my own, those things I haven't invested time in because I've been too busy, developing all of the crazy things that we do here. And not just within this, but like in the decades prior to this. And it's interesting. I've got back to writing my memoir, and I'm just reevaluating the introduction at the moment, which sounds like I'm a lot further away from publishing than I hope I am. But anyway, I'm kind of reevaluating it because I really want to make sure I'm saying the right thing. And it's very interesting to realize that, particularly now we've really scoped out what the end of the memoir is going to look like. It's really interesting to feel like I'm at that moment where, this is what the previous 2 decades of my life have been about, which is, I'm at like a culmination time, which is cool. So
yes, you get to be in a space in an area where you can actually think and hear, and
yes,
and you can hear nothing. Which is honestly very different from California,
right? And I went outside,
depending on where you are.
I went outside on my phone to my mum today, and she's like, I can hear birds. And I'm like, yeah, not sirens, birds.
This is different kind of sirens. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The only big noise that I've got is there's like a train that goes by. It's like all hours, and it's really loud. But like as we said before, we like trains.
I love trains. I grew up right across from a set of train tracks, and for me, when a train rolls by, it almost lulls me into like a drowsy, it's almost like safe, like being in your home in your bed, and a train comes by at night and you hear the horn and just the thump 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 of the wheels on the track. It's nice. I love I get drowsy at a train stop. Honk, wake up, buddy.
Well,
yes,
we've already touched a couple of times on interesting things that are going to lead into our topic today. We are not going to make this the Brace and Victoria personal update show. Updates over.
Too late.
Yeah, this is going to be a much more informative and, I hope, insightful, departure podcast. I feel like for me and us within Unveil, there's a lot of clarity forming around the message we are here to bring within this industry. And so you may notice a slight shift in the dynamic of our podcast as we go forward. You might not, I don't know, but we're going to see. And so today, should I crack on with introducing the topic?
Well, before we do you want to expand on what that kind of dynamic shift is going to entail? Because I think it's a very interesting thing that we are doing. Go for it.
Yeah, so we haven't kept it a secret, but we haven't exactly been open about it. That one of the things we will be launching within Unveil is our coach training certification. And the more I have built our online transformational healing retreat, which is a personal development course that anyone can do. You can do it if you're a coach. We even allow you to do it and steal the content. We don't care. We're not pejorative about this kind of stuff. But it's very much like a personal development course, but it's really deep. And the more I revisit it, and every time we take a little break from it, I go back and throw some more content into it. What I've actually realized that I've been doing is building the kind of end result version of what I want to train coaches to be able to deliver within a coaching container.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit of what I touched on earlier is that coaching container that I create, the ones that I create for my clients, are what I call truly holistic. And I hate the word holistic because it's used out of context all the time, as so many things are in this world. But by that, what I mean is that I bring in all of my physiological understandings, my sort of investigations in Eastern mysticism, my self-awareness system stuff within human design, my complete capacity to grasp what's underneath the dynamics of what I call the human condition. And it's really clear to me within the coaching industry that a lot of teachings are done on the end result. People can teach techniques, people can teach and do teach systems, or people teach strategies. They are not teaching coaches to understand what underlies either those strategies. So what the hell am I doing when I leverage a particular technique? Or what underlies the manifestation of the thing that they're trying to fix or resolve in the client to begin with. And so what we are getting in the coaching industry is a lot of very skilled people with techniques, but just not a real understanding of what underlies the human to deliver the technique in the appropriate way. And so, as the saying always goes, you know, if I can't even quite remember, but what is it? If you have a hammer, everything's a nail. To someone with a hammer, everything's it's that kind of thing. It's like you've got, let's just throw something under the bus. Why not, Victoria? So you are a breathwork specialist. So you approach every client with your breathwork toolkit, and there are situations in which that is entirely inappropriate. And that's not me just throwing breathwork under the bus. I could mention that in every single context. So our coach training certification is going to be a year-long program where we're not just going to teach techniques, though they're all going to be in there. All the ones that we can teach legitimately within a year-long container, with a lot of bouncing off points for deepening education for people who want it, to other people. We're not going to build a big thing where I'm suddenly going to be some expert in something that I'm not. We know the experts in the specifics, so we will refer you out. But within that year-long container, there's months where we're just talking about how to see, how to understand the underlyingness of what is there, so that from within your toolkit, you know exactly what to leverage at what specific time. And to speak to the dynamic that Brace mentioned, quite a lot of this emanates out of my experience and my kind of decades of just examining myself, those around me, people with illness in particular, as a desperate attempt to try and understand all of this. And so everything that I do is founded on the nervous system. And I got there through self-investigation and investigation of science and functional biochemistry. And then, suddenly the nervous system was there. You can actually get into coaching where they start to talk about the nervous system, but without that physiological backing or a deep immersion in trauma, you end up in the middle with a lot of language about trauma, the nervous system, that people don't really understand. So I'm trying to develop a different narrative that there are people talking about, but it's not the most common narrative because it's not the easiest, it's not the quickest fix. And so within our podcast, I want to switch it very much more into how to see differently. And I want to start bringing those things out within this and allow Brace to be you, the listener, because I am not aware when I'm talking on 3 layers deeper and more complex than people can understand, because I've been in this world too long. And it's a big reason why I love having Brace in my life, because he goes, but hang on a second. Say again. And I never take
once more for the brain cells in the back, please.
And I never take offense to that, because as a teacher, if I am not explaining it well enough to someone like Brace, who's already in this world, then I'm certainly not explaining it well enough for you, the listener, and you, the aspiring coach. So with that kind of backdrop laid, do you want to add anything into that, Brace? I'd love to.
It's something that we kind of got to the other day when we were discussing. There's, Neil deGrasse Tyson, astrophysicist, he always says that people are always taught what to think, not how to think. And that's something that Unveil's goal is, especially with the coach training, is we get a lot of, okay, this is how to think about, or this is what to think about this situation. But let's do some more critical thinking and take it to the next level, up and down and left and right and so on and so forth. So it's very exciting because it makes sense.
Yeah. And I just wanted to highlight that this social media world, everything needs to be memeable. Everything needs to be reducible to a 3-sentence or a 2,200 character Instagram post. What you get as a result of that is a lot of dictatorials, and you get a lot of do this, do this, do this. Or this is the only thing that matters, and it's clickbaity. So we're actually creating ourselves a harder job, but I'm okay about that, because when I think about legacy and the legacy that we both want to leave, it's not that we had the most followers or that we went viral with a clickbaity post. It's that we may have touched less people, but the people we touched were given tools.
Profound. Yeah.
And those tools that they knew how to use, when to use, and why to use them, rather than just felt like they had another thing on their to-do list, which is what coaching can be. It's like, oh, so sorry, I need the morning routine. I need to meditate for 20 minutes twice a day. I need to structure my day like this. I need to, there's this, Pareto principle. I need to stand up for 5 minutes in every hour. I need to, sorry, how many things am I adding to my to-do list today? And, sorry, every other weekend I've got to schedule in a mushroom experience. Okay. And then like 4 times a year, I need to fast for like 5 days. It's like, this shouldn't feel like work. And the reason it does is because there's a lot of generals. In fact, we were talking yesterday, and we will get onto our podcast topic in a second.
Well, I think we're dancing all around it. Anyway. So yeah.
But we were talking yesterday, you'd found this kind of article of like, it was a thing that they were telling about making decisions. And we kind of got into a theoretical conversation about the people who are doing these tests or creating these algorithmic things. They're very much founded in uncertainty, not trusting the inner compass, not trusting oneself. So we need an external system to know how to make a decision. And in very many ways, human design can be like that, to be honest. People are like, I'm supposed to do this thing that somebody's told me to do. And if you're given your human design reading and it feels like someone's describing someone who isn't you, get someone better to do your human design reading. It should feel like a recognition. It should feel like you feel so seen. Anyway, segues all over the place.
Yes.
Are we ready to go on to our topic for today, Bryce?
Absolutely. And everything that we've been actually touching on and talking about will very nicely fit into our topic for the day.
Yes. And we're going to take a specific, basically, because I got really hacked off with Instagram this morning. So, because there were literally 4 or 5 people with the same thing, same statement. And the statement simply was, the key to life is nervous system regulation. And I looked at it once I was like, then I saw the second and then the third and then the fourth person, and I nearly threw my phone across the room. Because what the flip does that even mean? And so I read the captions on the people's posts and I was like, they don't even know what this means. Like, what are they talking about? Why are they talking about it like this? So what we want to talk about today is nervous system regulation. What is it? How to do it? When to do it, why to do it, when not to do it, why not. Literally what we've just described in terms of how to use a tool, we're going to bring in today on the topic of, and it's a huge topic, of nervous system regulation. And if you are one of those people who listens to this podcast who posted on Tuesday, May the 17th about nervous system regulation, thank you for the inspiration. And I don't actually judge these people. I know the trainings that these people have done. I really know the level of information that they've been given, and it's further ahead than a lot of other coaches. But when you say to people the meaning of life or the key to life is nervous system regulation, and you create that extra to-do item, it's like, or so every time I'm dysregulated, I need to bring myself back into regulation. Okay. And so I'm really not supposed to be dysregulated. So you just build guilt, you build shame, you build struggle, you build that kind of self-defeating narrative around dysregulation. So I said it a few weeks ago. I know that one of the biggest problems in the coaching industry is people practicing outside their scope of practice. It's actually hilarious to me that, like, last week I embarked on a training that I'm doing at the moment, and I don't mind we'll tag it in the show notes. I'm doing trauma and somatics with Oriana Joy and Will Reason, and their entire first module is like practice within your scope of practice. I mean, it's more than that, but there was a huge, and I was just like, my nervous system just exhaled, and I was just like, oh, thank goodness. Like, people talking about the limitations of their own training and what you will be qualified to do at the end of it. So important. And I believe that also goes to what you share on social media, particularly in reels and images where people don't read the caption. So even if you explain it in the caption, if you've put something that's slightly misleading or clickbaity, like I've said, in the image or the reel or whatever, it's like, what service are you actually bringing by doing that? So that's where this started. And so let's talk a little bit about nervous systems and regulation and all of that kind of stuff. Where should I start, Brace? I suppose actually we need to do a little bit of a primer on the nervous system, a super quick primer on the nervous system for anybody listening who has no idea what I'm talking about when I say the words nervous system. So the nervous system is the information superhighway upon which things are built within the human experience. So it's essentially communication between everything inside you and every one of your sensing organs, which include your skin and touch and eyes and nose and all that kind of stuff. So essentially, you're taking information from the outside environment and information from the inside environment and combining those together to marshal a response internally with action, with chemicals, with hormones, etc. The bit that people forget or miss is that when those two things integrate, they don't just integrate neutrally, they integrate at the point at which they are going through what I call in our modules the computational framework of your history. And they basically, you make sense of your internal experience and external experience based on your past experience. So essentially, your being, mind, body, energy system has lived through stuff and created memories, physiological memories, somatic memories. And so as you're moving through the world, it's your nervous system that relays all this information to your brain and being and body, along with all of those memories. So you are kind of moving through the world a bit like a homing pigeon for things that were threatening in the past, and generally just mapping your world according to how you have been structured. And that can include, for my hypersensitive people, being taught that the entire world is unsafe and therefore we must react to everything, to numbness, people who dissociate and people just like are never really in the world. So there's a lot of kind of that, but that's the nervous system. It's essentially going, what's inside, what's outside, what do I remember, what should I do, is the simplest way of describing the nervous system. Does that make sense, Bryce?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it's just anything that you don't necessarily know why you do it, or you don't have a concrete idea of, why do I think that? Why do I feel this way in this situation? Like, that's all your nervous system communicating with you. We just haven't necessarily been taught to listen to that part of ourselves.
Which
and
is the perfect thing to say, because we started this by saying people are talking about nervous system regulation. So let's just give a little bit of a primer on regulated and dysregulated. So essentially, yes, the nervous system should just hum along and, you know, keep you stressed, not stressed. You're constantly mapping your environment for threat, basically. So is that person safe? Is this, that thing safe? Is this there? So you're not supposed to be neutral. You're supposed to go, oh no, we're okay. Oh no, we're okay, all the time. And then sometimes, oh, I'm tired, I just don't want to think about things right now. You're kind of supposed to oscillate through all of this all the time, constantly going, oh, we're okay, we're okay. And that's natural.
I have a question. Would you say that that subconsciously we do it within the subconscious, because if it was conscious thing, we would be absolutely spent and exhausted energy wise.
So there's a lot of studies into the fact that this is happening all the time, and therefore it would seem sensible for us to be aware of what's happening all the time, so we would have more bandwidth to do stuff. But actually, if you think about that, and it's a common thing within the emotional embodiment world, it's like you're not supposed to be emotionally embodied all the time. Sometimes it's actually safer for you not to feel the thing, which speaks back to, you know, is regulation the goal? Because, you know, there is this constancy that's happening, whereas, and you're right, it's not, it is in the unconscious until it needs to be louder, basically. So our bodies are constantly mapping until they need to get our attention. So there's so much that's happening neurochemically and all that kind of stuff underneath the surface. And in particular for women as well, just to speak to my women out there, it's like your whole suite of reactivity is entirely different in different phases of your life, in different phases of your menstrual cycle, in different phase, like if you're pregnant, if you just had a baby, like all of these hormones will drastically change where your being places threat level at any one moment in time, and also how conscious it wants you to be of it. So like we commonly talk about like baby brain for people who like just had babies, and they're kind of like spaced and sleepy and all that kind of stuff, but they're also supremely exhausted because they're hyper vigilant for the child. And it's that thing that happens when parents, and the reason we're talking about this obviously for people who listened last week is Bryce is about to become a dad. It's like, woohoo, yay. But parents, the nervous system changes. Like parents who go into having a baby think, oh my God, I sleep so soundly, I am never going to wake up to that child screaming. But what happens is literally the alertness of your nervous system changes, and you will wake up when your baby cries. And that is so normal, human, and natural that if we tried to calculate exactly what went into that computational mechanism within the human body, we would be lost. Like, and you just have to go, wow, like evolution is intelligent. And that's what I mean. It's like we are intelligent beings, which brings us back onto nervous system regulation and dysregulation. As I say those words, and it's clear to me that as people within the coaching industry use those words, some people in the coaching industry use those words, the emphasis is regulation good, dysregulation bad. That's what those posts were today. The key to life is nervous system regulation. It's like, sorry, the key to life is always being in some kind of neutral zone of being able to not feel dysregulated. And to be clear, by dysregulation, they basically mean stressed. They basically mean agitated. And so take the baby example.
Well, isn't it good to sometimes be dysregulated?
Take the baby example.
Okay, there we go.
You know, would I suddenly say to a mother, oh, do you know what? Your hypervigilance is dysregulation. So be further fast asleep so you don't wake up when your baby cries? That's ridiculous. And this is the thing that makes me laugh, because as soon as you point that out to people, it becomes obvious. So another great example, it's like stress is technically dysregulation. So I'm super flipping stressed. And even I had a friend ask me this the other day. This is a great example. He doesn't listen to the podcast, so I'm going to use this example. I have a friend who has a lot of mold sensitivity. He's been exposed to a lot of mold. And so cumulatively over time, that's become a real problem for his system. He knows there's other stuff going on. I know there's other stuff going on, but he's just moved into another house and there's mold. And so he sent me a voice note, and it was like a really awkward voice note, because he was like, I'm just trying to work out whether I'm just supposed to regulate myself enough to feel safe within this mold environment, or I'm supposed to just get out of it. And I almost burst out laughing when I heard the voice note, because the dysregulation that he's experiencing in exposure to mold in his specific circumstances is perfectly normal for his body to be throwing him into dysregulation, because it doesn't want to be exposed to more mold. So it's not a case of, I'm just going to sit in this moldy house and try and regulate myself 1,000,001 times. In his case, the dysregulation is saying, get out.
Yes. And dysregulation, is it fair to say, is, 100% of the time, survival mode.
Yes, and let's add context to that.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely wanted to. Because survival mode, like anger, is something I've discussed on here very much. Anger is a necessary dysregulatory state to be in because it activates us. Also, anger, if not, I almost said managed, if anger not addressed properly, can get away from us, and it can become almost like too much of a good thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
also within survival stuff, we need to recognize that dysregulation looks different in different people. So oftentimes the way you learnt that was safest to be dysregulated and disconnected as a child, you will repeat as an adult. So like there are many people whose dysregulation will look like apathy, disconnection, lack of stimulation rather than active stimulation. And you can almost think of this like the prime threat that we always use an example is being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Now, technically, you would step into nervous system dysregulation at that point, but it's actually very adaptive. It's the perfect thing to do because you'd either drop into freeze, play dead, stop everything, or you would go into run. Now, so many people, their first adaptive response to stress as a child was the freeze, and it worked, so that they take that into adulthood, and it becomes almost more difficult to convince them they have this kind of imprint because it's a stuckness, it's a dysmotility, it's an immobility more than it's I'm stressed all the time and I've always got to be doing things and over, which is very easy to that point.
If I'm quiet and I'm still, I'm not disrupting anything, I can hide, like that sort of. Yes. Yeah.
And so that can be dysregulated. Seems very regulated. I'm quiet and still, but it can be but also, is it dysregulated or is it just adaptive and responsive? And so that's the thing. It's like nobody would say to newborn parents, oh, please regulate and be less hypervigilant. Nobody would say to somebody running from a saber-toothed tiger, oh, by the way, please regulate right now.
So do we need to?
Yeah.
So do we just need to redefine what regulated and dysregulated actually means? Because dysregulated is not necessarily a bad thing, because it can be also a very, very good thing. Can it be just a state?
So what I would prefer,
or is it like balanced, or
precisely that? So I prefer we threw it out to begin with, because
there,
there is this kind of like, what people mean when they say regulated is in the window of tolerance. Basically, not going to explain the science of the window of tolerance, but it's essentially the bit in between the two states that we've just described: Hulk mode, stress, or hypoarousal, which is like stuckness. So the bit in the middle is the window of tolerance. And what people mean by regulated is within that bit. But actually, that's completely not where we should be staying when we have a newborn baby and or we are being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And it is so, yeah, okay, let's get into a state of window of tolerance for the majority of the time if you want to. I think what people mean when they say the key to life is nervous system regulation is that outside of those extremes, outside of being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, outside of being a newborn parent, are you being sent into hyperarousal, fight or flight, Hulk brain, or hypoarousal, frozen stuckness, at things that you quote unquote shouldn't? And by that, we mean triggers that are not truly threatening, but your nervous system is interpreting as threatening.
It's threatening, yes.
And so the nervous system will react to stimuli. And the whole point of the nervous system is it will react to threat, whether real or perceived. And so everything in coaching, and this is what coaches kind of fail to realize, is that we are playing within perceived. So we are working on where people perceive threats, where it doesn't technically exist, because that has been encoded by the childhood experience, early life experience, etc., or, you know, stressful adult experience, but by trauma, to be a different realm of interpretation to the next person. So everything we do in coaching is we're playing with perceived within the nervous system, and we're altering what your nervous system, no, what we do at Unveil is we work on altering what your nervous system perceives as a threat. What most other coaches are doing is giving you tactics and techniques to use once you have already stepped into imbalance or hyper or hypo arousal.
Or how to keep yourself from going into.
They don't really do that though, Bryce. It's the thing. It's like, you can do that, but
So
typically if you change where your expression is, or you're not really preventing yourself from going into stress, you're just moving it elsewhere. And a lot of coaches that I see are quietening the overt expressions of stress, and it's just going inwards. It's just creating toxic chemistry, but you're getting through the experience that you've perceived as threatening, which is not really healing.
Got it. Which, I mean, was going to be kind of my next question. So once we have that delineated in our head, like this is regulating or managing, it's not necessarily healing. It's helping me get through this moment. But what about my life? Am I just going to have to get through this moment forever?
I love that you just said that, because that's exactly what you're paving the way for if you learn these techniques. And let's just talk about the techniques before we jump on. So there are ways to regulate. Like if you are in that moment where you're about to, you used a great example. Do you want to talk about the example you were talking about earlier?
Oh yes. So when I first got into this work, I was new.
No, not that one. Pause on that for a second. No, I was talking about the Mel Robbins thing. I want to talk about actually regulating rather than not.
Oh, yes. Excuse me. So there was this video that I really liked on Instagram, Mel Robbins, and she was speaking before a crowd, and she was like, all right, is there anybody here that would literally have an anxiety or panic attack if I pulled them up on stage? And this poor woman's coworkers were like, she's right here. And Mel walked over to her, and immediately physically she was like closed down, like she started crying, and Mel hadn't even really said anything. and you know, tried to help her regulate within the moment, pulled her up on stage, and then, you know, did some kind of mindset reframes with her, which made her feel safer in the moment. But when that moment comes up again, I think this is what we're getting into. When that moment comes up, which was a great tool for in the moment.
Exactly. And pause there, because there are tools for in the moment. So public speaking is a really common one, where it's that bridge between, is this threat true or is it perceived? There's quite a lot of cost to public speaking. You can mess up. There's quite a lot of like risk. And so if you're not confident in it, if you haven't done it enough, like, or if you have those past experiences where you've done it and it was terrible, there's a lot of reasons why people can experience that stress about standing up on a stage. So if you are one of those people and you have a speech to give, the bit that we're going to come on to in this podcast is going to be totally useless for you because it takes time. So in that moment, mindset stuff, the whole idea of imagining the audience naked is to decrease the threat. You're humanizing them.
Right.
Or, Tim Ferriss does a lot of these playing out the absolute worst case scenario mindset analyses. They're great. It's like, if I just play this to the worst case scenario, what happens? And can I cope with that? All of these mindset things are helpful. They are decreasing that nervous system threat once it has already appeared. So the story that Brace just shared, the woman was already, quote unquote, to use the phrase that we've been using, dysregulated. She was already stressed. So the techniques that Mel Robbins was using, and she's brilliant at this, is bringing her down from massive dysregulation into window of tolerance. And she's using mindset stuff, creating a different level of consequences. You can use breathing. Breathing is a really common thing to use for this kind of stuff, because the way you breathe literally changes the way your heart is beating, and therefore how stressed you are going to end up being. So you can reverse engineer, and you'll know this because if you get stressed, your breathing gets shallow and you kind of like start to breathe from your chest. Right. And if you just force alter that in any way, but you can use a technique like box breathing, which is 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, or just lengthening the exhales. Essentially, your parasympathetic, everything slows down when you're exhaling. So if you have longer exhales, you'll be slowing things down for longer. This is not rocket science.
Yeah, another one actually that I read this morning was the cold water. It's like submerging your face in like ice cold water, like kind of breaks the vagus nerve like reaction. It almost like snaps your nervous system out of dysregulation. Quotes.
Well, it's a pattern interrupt. Cold.
There you go. Thank you.
Just to touch
That's
on
the one I needed.
Well, just to touch on cold and hot, and it's funny actually because I was having a shower this morning in my new home in Austin, and the water didn't get very hot, and I just giggled to myself because like Austin is the home of like people having cold plunges and doing cold thermogenesis, and I thought, you literally trying to force me already into having a cold shower. This is not happening, universe. Anyway, but cold exposure, it does alter things. Cold and heat. So our body is responsive to these things, in particular heat. So in saunas, our body releases a load of things called heat shock proteins because we're designed to adapt. I don't love using cold. There's a reason I don't love using it. Essentially, it's creating a stressor. So what that does is it takes your stressed state and it gives your body something else to stress about, i.e. I've just been splashed with really flipping cold water. And it literally just diverts your stress from where it was over to the cold. Honestly, use whatever works.
You know what's so funny? There's a scene from a movie. You'll love this. It's a movie called Major Pain. And it stars Marlon Wayans. And this guy is like shot. And he's like, does it hurt? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, let me see your hand. And he breaks his finger. Yeah. And he was like, does it hurt as bad now? Like totally pulled him out of it.
Of course. And this is like, when you point this out to people, it's so obvious, but like some dentists will do this. Like if you're about to have the anesthetic shot and they put the needle in and it flipping hurts. But if you just pinch your thumb, the bed of your thumbnail, your entire brain is going, what's happening on my, like if you get your nail and dig in, your entire brain is like down on the hurting thing in your thumb and you kind of miss the needle going into your gum. It's literally just.
I didn't know that one. That's a good one. That's a good one.
And it's like these little things, like if you really need the loo, but you're nowhere near a restroom, you can like pinch yourself and your brain starts thinking about that. And if you've noticed, if you ever need a restroom before you leave somewhere and then you have to drive from where you are to home and suddenly on the way you've forgotten that you needed the loo, that is because your brain's focusing on driving so much that it can't also think, oh, my bladder's full, I might need to find a restroom.
Right. So all this being said, those are really great techniques for in the moment stuff. But
there's also, and I just want to talk about as well,
yeah,
somatic stuff. So if you are stressed and all of this chemistry is feeling like internally, if you actually focus on something external, 3 or 4 points in your external environment, which bring you out of your own body into the outside. Maybe not so great for public speaking because you'd suddenly be aware that there was a huge audience worth of people there. But it's these kind of things where focus on something outside of you and you're just, again, it's a distraction technique. You're bringing your being out of obsession with the somatic lived reality into the environment, and it pulls you out slightly. So all of these things are great in the moment, but oh my God, are they exhausting? Because basically what you have to do is walk into a situation super triggered, and then you have to basically regulate yourself. So the key to life isn't regulation particularly. It's kind of like working out why you're getting dysregulated in the first place. And you don't resolve dysregulation with regulation.
This is very true. and it's good because this is, one of the main goals I feel for Unveil is to teach people how to not just depend on the techniques and the strategies and stuff, but get to a place where those techniques and strategies aren't even necessary, because there is a natural ability that is formed to be okay within said situation.
Yeah. And not every situation, obviously. We're talking about pursuit here. Remember, I don't want you to be okay when you're being pursued by a saber-toothed tiger. So
yeah, no.
Please run. Like, don't take the Unveil advices. No, you should just be okay.
It's like, yeah. No, like in those places that maybe it's not the norm to feel this aroused or like hypo aroused.
Yeah.
And
it's what I love about this is that it's completely antithetical to human reality, but it is the only thing that works. And it has to be slow, gradual, increased exposure to the thing that is creating the trigger. So let's take our talking on stage example, just because we've started to use it. There is no real way to fix that problem of freaking out just from a mindset perspective. Sure, you can decrease the odds. It will probably take things down a notch or two, but you're always going to get that fear here. And it's interesting, actually, and I can bring this into a personal example. People will know if you've listened to this podcast, I was a musician in my youth. I played 3 instruments. I did it all to a very high standard. But I was always anxious. And in my youth, I got over it. Like, I performed in musicals, performed in jazz band, all that kind of stuff, and then haven't done it for a long time. And the first time I started playing again, and it still happens right now, it's like I didn't resolve the issue. I just basically did exposure therapy on it whilst I was a teenager to get through the events that I had to do. And if I go to perform for people now, I'm petrified, or so petrified that I can't actually do it very well. And that is just an evidence that I didn't resolve the thing that was underneath it. But the only way to shift your nervous system's somatic memory, so the memory of actually this is threatening, therefore I need to step outside of that window of tolerance, is to disprove your nervous system's belief. We're being a bit, anthropomorphic with the nervous system, but it's essentially this sense that that thing is threatening. And that doesn't happen through exposure therapy. And it's been really debunked now, that the psychiatry of old, where people just used to go, oh, just keep riding a roller coaster if you're scared of them, it'll work, you'll get over it. It doesn't work. It just pushes the fear elsewhere. Hence why I did exposure therapy as a teenager, and it didn't fix the issue with my performing. So there is a real need for experiential learning, because what we are talking about with a nervous system memory is an experiential learning. So if you've laid down the truth according to your being that this thing is threatening, or the thing that looks like that thing is threatening, your nervous system has no evidence that that is inaccurate. And you can't just say to the nervous system, oh, here, just do it. Of course it's inaccurate, because your nervous system is already in a space of stress. And particularly with the public speaking, it's a really good example, because there's very few easy on-ramps to public speaking. So every time you do it, you're throwing yourself back into the deep end with all of that run-up of stress. And then you're suddenly there and you're petrified, and you get through it and you come up and it's like, you haven't learned anything. Your nervous system has had the same experience. So the only way to truly alter that perceived reality, that perceived threat, is to titrate slightly, and that just means gradually increase. We have a lot of fancy words, but it's titration of stimulus in a safe environment. So everything that I do with my coach is, in an hour and a half session, we'll spend an hour just being social and talking about nice stuff, and then maybe 10 minutes getting into something stressful, and maybe 10 minutes in the stressful, and then maybe 10 minutes getting out of it, and then an hour of chit chat. And that sounds like a waste of time and money, especially to people who are like, I should be getting results from my coaching. And it's like, I am getting results from that coaching. Everything that you witness in front of you right now today is because my nervous system is suddenly learning that experiencing those challenges and talking about difficult things and holding difficult emotions in my body and holding difficult memories in my body within an absolutely safe context where I'm held, I am loved, I am supported, is so therapeutic, because suddenly my nervous system is learning that I don't need to hold on to fear of going into those moments, fear of talking about those memories, fear of being vulnerable with somebody, fear of holding that shame in me, because I can talk about my own shame and I can go, oh, look, here's this thing that I've been trying really hard to keep away from everyone, and I'm going to just show it to you. And you don't go anywhere. It's so supportive. And what you're doing by having all of that exposure in a tiny way is slowly expanding what your nervous system can be exposed to before it steps you out of your window of tolerance. And it is the only way to heal. The only way. There is no quick fix. There's no, oh, just be regulated. And so if all of those people on Instagram this morning had actually said the key to life is expanding your window of tolerance so that you are only responsive and reactive to things that are truly threatening and not to things that aren't, I would have been less triggered by their very posts. But they didn't. And you can't paraphrase the human vehicle because it is complex. And the more we apply reductionist theory onto human conditions, the least service we are being to our clients and our followers.
Word.
So what have I said that wasn't clear though, Bryce? Because I know that was a lot of kind of information and like download, but what was not delineated in such a way that means that there may still be confusion?
So what I am gathering is that it's a slow process to get to a point of, and I think we said this earlier, regulation versus resolution. Like regulation, quick in the moment, like quick fixes, things like that. There's definitely a ton of stuff out there that can get you through the moment. But for someone who is looking for like true transformation and healing, it's going to take time, effort, and slowly, like basically working out the nervous system. Like a bodybuilder can get jacked pretty quick if he's using steroids and shortcuts. There are no shortcuts for resolution, transformation, and true healing. You can't take a shortcut.
Yeah. And it's I think the thing to say is it's so attractive to people who are holding pain to run through things really damn quickly.
Yeah.
Like I remember the moment when stuff changed with my coach really profoundly for me, because I started pulling apart my own identity, because I've always been really proud of the fact that I see the difficult thing and I run headlong into it to do it first. I thought, this is a really cool
How long did
thing.
it take you to get there though?
To see that with my coach, that it was not a good strategy. Not very long, but then that's because, as he said, I've been in this work so long. So that for me was on about session 3, but for him, he's like, that's normally where people get after 6 months. And that honestly, I get, and it does take that amount of time, because when he said to me, you can work with me for 2 months, which was the amount of time I was going to be in the UK, or you can work with me for 9 months. I was like, I can't do 2 months because I know me. If you give me 2 months, I will think I need to be fixed in 2 months. So I will put on my, how can Victoria run the gauntlet with her own coaching in 2 months to be done. And I know myself well enough. And I just said, I have to do 9 months. And he said, okay, why? And I explained, and he went, makes sense. And it's really common for people who are holding pain and suffering and trauma, and particularly memories they don't want to look at, that they want to do everything super fast, because it's actually an impulse that's derived from that running away thing. So when I say to people, slow, titrate nervous system expansion, but not in a, oh, we want to see how much you can hold kind of way, but in a, you know, gently allowing your nervous system to be safe with more. This isn't, if I stretch you, you can hold more. It's if I allow you to feel safe with a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, you'll actually feel safe with more, rather than just this snap back of a stretch where you actually don't feel safe with that much more, particularly if you have a trauma history, like a bigger trauma history. And this work is so intimate because you have to feel safe with the person that you are allowing to hold your own expansion. And that's why this stuff matters. That's why we are intentional about building a coaching network, because we're not the safest people for everyone on the planet. Brace and I are really safe for who we're really safe for. I am intimidating to certain people. My level of language intimidates certain people. That's not safe. Like, you don't need to be in a container with me if you don't feel safe with me. That's why I have people that I can refer you to, because it matters more to me that you have the infrastructure in which you can do the work that's right than you work with me or Brace.
Yeah, because the ultimate goal is the client's transformation.
Yeah,
it's like whatever works the best, do that.
Yes, and works is deceptive. So if you, just to go back to my earlier comment about breath work, you come out of a breathwork session and you feel amazing and you think it worked, and it's like, what actually happened? And I'm not going to spoil this one. We have a whole module in our online transformational healing retreat about what you're actually doing in breathwork, psychedelic experiences, somatic release exercises, which are another form of regulation. It's like processing the thing, but basically with the goal of getting rid of it. Because this is the thing we didn't mention earlier, and it's the thing that I really want to double click on. It's like, if you are outside of your window of tolerance, that's not the problem. That is a signal that something is wrong for you. And if you're in an environment and you're like, but I shouldn't feel outside of my window of tolerance right now, that's not a key to go regulate. It's a key to go and ask yourself some questions. Okay, so technically I'm not stressed. Why am I? Technically I shouldn't be outside of my window of tolerance. What's actually happening from within me?
Why? Why are you?
Why?
Why? Ask why.
And sometimes it's a deeper physical reason. Like my friend with the mold. It's like, why am I stressed? Because there's more mold, dude. Get out. Like with me in the property in LA, like, why am I stressed? Because of the noise. Do I need to regulate? Probably. Did I regulate for 10 days? Yes. Was that long enough? Yes. Like, done. Don't need to. I do sometimes have to sense check with my coach or with you. It's like, quote, is this a problem? Was the question that I asked my coach. It's like, do I have to work on me to get over this reactivity thing? Or is this an external problem? And for someone who's been in the work for a long time, the tendency is it's a me problem. If I just regulate myself enough, if I just work on myself enough, if I just like expand my nervous system enough, I'll be able to cope with more and more and more. And that's a really big key for people who are givers and people who are people pleasers, and for people who like people to like them. And, you know, it's just like,
because in that you deny yourself and what you really need.
Right. And there's that tendency we get of like, when were we talking about it? Was I talking about it with you? No, I was talking about it with a client. It's like the difference between responsibility, agency, and control, which is probably a whole podcast in and of itself, which we might pencil in for next time. But there's this like arch responsibility, as in everything is my responsibility, doesn't mean everything is within your control. Because if you're trying to control everything, basically it's a trauma response. So technically you're in the state of everything's my responsibility, therefore if it goes wrong, it's my fault. I've only got myself to blame. There's no external actors in this. It's all a me problem. If I just do me is safe. And if you're not watching YouTube, my whole body has gone into this like curled up, like little me universe thing. It's a very big safety response. Whereas the truth of arch responsibility and ultimate responsibility and, is allowing yourself to have agency, as in the power to influence the situation. But influence also means get out of the situation. So responsibility means agency. It doesn't mean everything is in your control and everything is your fault. It's a really fascinating topic. Grace is going, want to talk more about this?
I wrote it down. I wrote everything down. I was like, I'm gonna make some notes because that would be a fun podcast to do.
Yeah, I think we should do a whole separate topic on that because it is really common. It's another one. It's another thing like today. People say it as a phrase. Oh, everything is your responsibility. What does that even mean?
Right.
And if you find yourself reading these phrases and thinking, oh, that's great. And then you go, what does it mean?
Well, that phrase triggers the shit out of me. Sorry. Now I got to put the expletive or just bleep that out.
Oh, good.
When someone says everything is your responsibility, I get so triggered. Get so triggered because that's
people get triggered for different reasons. Everything's your fault.
What I hear is that everything's your fault. You are broken.
Yeah.
You are a problem. Not you're your own problem. Not like even when people you're your own worst enemy. Hate it when people say that because it's like that didn't help me do anything. You don't think that I already know? And for anyone listening, you can tell just in my tone now that I'm like
this is when I hate being in Texas. I'm like, I can't hug him and just take it all away.
But it's like, there's so much more that goes into it. So don't dismiss
so much more
people's experience. Yeah.
There's so much more that people get triggered in. So that's your unique experience of that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But people can get triggered because, I was going to say you go to the nuclear option immediately, which sounds, again, terrible. And it's not meant to be a criticism, but it's like you are broken. Is what that phrase means. Right. Some people think it means everything's your fault, which is a slightly different thing. That's kind of my tendency. And I do that everything therefore must be in my control. And I do it from a self perspective. I do the whole, if I can change enough about myself, the outside world would work. Really common spiritual thing. It's like, if I can change myself enough, everyone else around me will suddenly be different. So we're going to put a pin in this because we're about to get into a whole
because that's a whole other I was about to say that's a whole other topic. I love it.
Right. But this is
so
what we
the next month we're all
but we're just going to bust all the myths. So if you find a phrase in the coaching industry is like, I don't understand or I can't implement it or this one triggers me, send us an email, send us a DM, like tell us what it is, tell us the myth that you want us to bust, tell us the topics you want us to explore, tell us the things you want us to go into from an unveiled perspective, which I believe is now becoming more and more clear to people. It's like, we want to empower, we don't want to lecture. We want to give people the absolute rule book. And the only way you would then need to come and do any of our trainings is if you want to give that rule book to other people or use that rule book to help other people. And I'm so excited. I planned out our year-long coach training certification. And it's really good. It's so good. And I think it's, for me, it's where my absolute passion lies. And, it's going to be this setting. So I'm gesturing at Zoom for anyone who's actually listening, not watching. But like I've built in buffer weeks where people can ask me tons of questions. And the first year Brace is going to be my teaching assistant in this. And he's going to ask all the dumb questions so that you don't need to feel stupid if you're training with us, because Brace will ask all the dumb questions for you. And by dumb, we just mean, please, Victoria, dumb yourself down. Our marketing woman said the other day, normally I like people to dumb themselves down, but it's not going to work for you, is it, Victoria? I was like, no. No, sorry. But also supporting all of the student body. So Braces really are head of people. So he's going to be supporting everyone, coaching everyone if you need extra coaching.
Love that.
Pre-vetting you. So you will have an interview with Brace if you want to come and do our coach training certification. But you don't need to be a coach. You don't need to have any experience. Because everything we are doing should empower you from 0 to master coach within a year. But you can, anyway, we'll release more about it in times to come. Oh, sorry, blinded by the sun. So did we cover the topic, Brace?
I think so. I think rather thoroughly. It's about like regulation works in certain scenarios, but the ultimate goal shouldn't be only regulating throughout your entire life.
Yeah.
There
or constantly being regulated.
Yeah. There's a whole level that you can get to where that true healing and transformation that you desire, it's available. It's out there. And unfortunately, it hasn't necessarily been tapped. Like the keg has not been tapped. I was like thinking keg. Should I do a maple tree? Like the maple, like that's like I don't know, coming out of the tree.
It's an untapped resource. We'll go with
there we
resource.
Go. Yes. And what we want to do is continue to teach others and expand this way of thinking and bring it to the mainstream. Because yes, there are a lot of great quick fixes out there, but they don't necessarily fix anything. Not that you need fixing. So
yeah, well, we can get into semantics about language, but and just to be clear about that, like we like to disregard the phrase fix because it does imply that you're broken. But I think it's really true to say that there are characteristics and parts of ourselves that we would all prefer were quieter, not there, gotten rid of. And all of these phrases seem really negative, but also they're really honest. So we're not about like getting away from, I want to be fixed. I want to fix this. I want to heal this. I want to get better in this area. I want to change this. And we get to support you to do that. But that doesn't always mean equilibrium. So the goal should never be neutrality, equilibrium, feeling better, feeling balanced all the time. The goal should be the capacity to feel the fullness of your human experience and get yourself out of trouble when you need to, either by self-regulation and staying or by getting out. And that's why I don't love regulation as the only thing that's the key, because sometimes the key to your safety is leave. So absolutely everything about the work that we do is changing what you perceive as threatening over time to empower you to have a bigger window of tolerance. But that's not all consuming. That is like, there's still boundaries. And the biggest tool that you can have isn't regulation, it's awareness and agency. So I know where I am. I know that I stepped out of a comfort zone. I know what I can do to get myself safe. And that's why nervous system regulation isn't the key to life. Self-awareness, self-empowerment, and self-agency are.
And there you go.
Kind of wish this mic was less expensive so I could just do a mic drop.
Well, yeah, I actually just pictured like a gavel and I just wanted to hit the hammer.
Speaking of which, just to shout out our friend Megan Toma, she's just been like really minimized on certain social platforms. So if you love her, she's still covering the trial.
Yes.
It's still hilarious. She's now brought her dad into the fray, who is awesome and is delivering some commentary on Amber Heard that is next level special. So go and like hit her up again and make sure she gets her visibility. But yes, just to keep in touch with like modern current affairs that we all care about deeply.
Wonderful. How you feeling?
Good.
Feeling good? Feeling good. So on that good, we hope you're feeling good out there, everyone. For now, my name is Bryce Harris.
And my name is Victoria Fenton.
And we are
Unveiled.
Stay informed with all things Unveil. Sign up for the newsletter at unveilenterprises.com/sign up.